there's a societal pressure to make your child conform so that they can fit in, they can have friends, they can be successful at school. And so all of us, the most well-meaning parents in the world, put that pressure on our kids early on. And we don't even realize we're doing it because we're not fully aware ourselves of what those societal pressures are. And a lot of times it takes your kid to just stop functioning or to be a major behavior problem or, have deep depression or something like that before we go, hey, wait a minute. What is the quality of our child's life right now? And what can we do to make it different?
Welcome to Tilt Parenting, a podcast featuring interviews and conversations aimed at inspiring, informing, and supporting parents raising differently wired kids. I'm your host, Debbie Reber. This week, I'm bringing back to the podcast educator and therapist Dr. Melanie Hayes. Melanie focuses on helping neurodivergent, gifted, and twice exceptional people find their niche and work to their strengths. With a master's in gifted ed and marriage and family therapy, as well as a doctorate in educational leadership with a focus on twice exceptionality, Melanie has spent the past decade building support and understanding for the 2E and 2EA population. She's the author of 2 books on twice exceptionality, We Tried Normal, and her brand new book, Being Twice Exceptional. Melanie is also the founder of the Big Minds Micro School, and in fact, Melanie joined me on the show a few years ago to talk more about how her school mentors and supports 2E kids. During this conversation, Melanie shares insights from her new book aimed at twice exceptional adults. She explains what the term 2EA means, the unique needs of 2EA people, and why she's passionate about radical self-acceptance. Melanie also shared her thoughts on what stands in the way of a more accepting and supportive society for neurodivergent people, as well as her advice for parents raising 2E and 2EA kids. And if you too are neurodivergent, 2E or 2EA, I hope this conversation inspires you to be your unique self in a more, as Melanie puts it, radical way. Before I get to that, as you may know, I've been working to create some self-study programs for parents and caregivers who are looking for specific support. Last fall, I shared a mini course called the Emergency Reset, and my newest course is a 12-month Differently Wired Club boot camp featuring monthly themes, conversations with experts and authors, worksheets, accountability challenges, deep dive resources, and weekly emails to keep you on track. Together, over the course of the next year, I'll help you take the small, tangible, and doable steps that can have a positive and truly profound impact on your family. The big goal? More peace, confidence, and joy for you and your kids. To learn more, visit courses.tiltparenting.com or just go to Tilt Parenting and click on Courses in the main menu. Lastly, don't forget to check your podcast feed on Fridays as Playback Fridays, where I re-release some of my favorite episodes from the first 2 years of the show, is here again. I've got upcoming episodes with Alfie Cohn on unconditional parenting, Karen Young of Hayes Sigmund talking about anxiety in children, Dr. Dan Peters on parenting with purpose and intention, and much more. All right, thanks so much, and now here is my conversation with Melanie. Hey, Melanie, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Debbie. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to talk about your new book. As we're recording it, it's not quite out yet, but by the time this comes out, listeners will be able to check it out. But could you take a few minutes and do your own introduction for yourself and who you are in the world?
Sure. So, like you, I'm a mom who was beginning my work based on the needs of my children. And then it just has grown and blossomed into being an activist for the 2E community and somewhat now expanding into the autistic community. My son is diagnosed, but he doesn't really identify so much as that. His identity is more 2E, which makes sense because that's been my work and activism for a twice exceptional community for a long time. But as my realm of influence has increased, I've really wanted people to be proud of being twice exceptional and to embrace that culture. And I really have moved into a definite area of activism, and now activism for autistic people who are twice exceptional. So it's really exciting work. It's a pleasure to be an ally to the autistic community and to try to help people better understand the needs of 2E people who also have autism.
Yeah, and listeners, just so you know, Melanie has been on the show before, and we talked specifically about how to support twice exceptional students in classrooms, in school systems. So definitely listen to that. I'll have a link in the show notes page. But I'm really interested in this activism role that you said you're stepping more into. What does that actually look like for you? And how does it feel to be playing that role?
Yeah, it feels great. I started out, our last podcast was really around helping people because I recognize that not everybody can pull their kids out of public school. And so, we wanted to provide some sort of support around that. But the more I get into the working with these communities and seeing the people, it reminds me, there was a part in your book that really struck home to me where you talked about how Asher had to apologize for who he was, not necessarily what he did. And I see this so much within our community that people just feel broken and wrong for just being their authentic selves. And so I've moved sort of a little bit radically away from trying to help people help their children fit into the norm and more into saying, wait a minute, why do we always have to adapt to the norms of society? It's time that society does a little adapting for us too. And I'm not saying that, at all times people have to accommodate every aspect of being a neurodivergent person, but it doesn't seem right that people are masking and stressing and really suffering because the world's not willing to admit that these people need some sort of different accommodations in their life. And so, I'm just moving into this sort of radical self-acceptance and helping communities figure out how to make the world work for them.
And are you looking at all kinds of systems? So school systems, the workplace, is your work more focused on adults at this point?
Yeah, well, specifically, I was asked to write a book about twice exceptional adults. So being twice exceptional is definitely geared towards adults, and about all aspects of their life. So there's chapters on work and housekeeping and personal care and romance and all of that sort of stuff. So I tried to cover all the aspects of being a twice exceptional adult with autism, but I do in my regular work still do a lot of activism for children too, because I think that's where it starts. You'll see, in the book, a lot of the stories talk about the trauma and damage happens when these kids are young and they're in school and having to try to adapt and being not able to succeed either in friendships or academics or, relationships with teachers. And so they grow up feeling like there's something inherently wrong with them. I worked from that angle too, to try to help parents and teachers and professionals and the children themselves learn how to self-advocate and be proud of who they are and ask for what they need. But also this book is specifically around tackling some of the problems. And really it is kind of a love letter to the 2E autistic community to say, I embrace who you are in every aspect, and I want you to feel proud of who you are and go out into the world and say, this is what I need, this is what I can contribute, and you need to recognize our community.
I get so excited about the increase in resources for adults because, as I'm sure you've seen and I've talked about on the show, so many adults are discovering their own neurodivergence as they go through this journey with their kids. And I feel like your book is also a really great companion to Nicole Tétrault's book, Insight into a Bright Mind, which is also about twice exceptionality from that neuroscientist perspective.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really exciting to see that there are more and more places for adults to see their own experiences be reflected and to realize that they're not alone, right? And that they're okay and perfect the way they are.
Yeah. And I think it's cool that, when we started, we were all in our own little silos. You and I have been doing this for a long time. And it's so cool to see those silos connecting And we're starting to have this interconnected support system, it's crucial and wonderful.
Yeah, it is really exciting. So much progress, I feel like, in the past 10 years. So I wanted to talk about this idea of 2EA, which was a new term for me. Can you explain what that is and just tell us more about what that means?
Yeah, when I started writing the book, it got a little wordy to keep saying, twice exceptional adults with autism. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to coin a new term because, we've got the G3 and all these other new terms. So I just said, I'm going to coin the term 2EA. And I don't mean it to be labeling or disrespectful in any way. It was really just for ease of writing and reading. But I do think that people can see that there's a subset of being twice exceptional that is specifically a twice exceptional person on the spectrum. And there are some specific needs related to being a 2EA person.
Can you say more about what some of those specific needs are? Because I think it is interesting and important to characterize that as unique. And it isn't something that most people talk about. We usually kind of lump, twice exceptionality as this huge bucket, and it can look so many different ways. And of course, every 2E person, every neurodivergent person is different. But what are some of the shared unique challenges or things that 2EA people have to navigate?
Yeah, well, so they have sort of some of the common things you hear about autism, of the sensory to the environment, some of the social language struggles. A lot of them have gut problems are pretty common. There can be issues with working in an environment or schooling in an environment that has external stressors. A lot of times, people on the spectrum, their nervous system is at a heightened state all the time. And then you combine that. So those are also common traits with 2E people who might have ADHD or dyslexia, or, it tends to go along with 2E. So those can be common traits. But when you talk about a 2E person who's autistic, it suddenly becomes the giftedness is often hidden. There's a really beautiful film that just came out on the ASAN, the group for autistic people that is run by autistic people. And it's nonverbal autistic people discussing their thoughts and feelings and experiences. And they're so underestimated. Oftentimes people don't see what's going on inside, especially, even if the person is able to mask and sort of pass as quote, a typical person in the world. What's going on behind that mask is oftentimes really painful, really a huge struggle. Just to get through an emotional conversation can wipe them out for days afterwards. And I don't think people realize it's the same thing that we know about 2E people, that the giftedness compensates for the disability. And so the disability is often hidden. And that's very true for 2EA people. If they're able to do the masking successfully, people may not have any idea of how hard they're working just to function in the environment. So, for example, somebody at work sitting in a meeting gets called on to, make a comment, and they've been expending so much energy just to focus on all the multiple conversation at the table that they're not able to say what's on their mind. And so this brilliant thought that they might have 5 minutes later, the time is missed to be able to communicate it effectively. And they often don't feel like it's okay to say, give me a minute, this is part of my disability. I want to respond, but I need a few minutes. Can you come back to me? Because that's just not accepted, right? People don't do any of the most simple, benign compensation so that this person can fully engage and show their brilliance.
And you mentioned, just to go back, you mentioned the ASAN, that's the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. Is that what you're?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. A great group.
Yeah, fantastic group. We'll have a link to that in the show notes page, and I'll include a link to the film as well, if I can find that you mentioned. We'll be right back after this quick break. Maybe I've watched too many seasons of The Amazing Race, but every time I have to go somewhere on the subway, I treat it like a competition. It's all about making the right gut decisions about which route will get me there the fastest. Sometimes those decisions get me where I'm going early, and other times my gambles don't really pay off. Probiotics can't help with most gut decisions, but if your gut needs a little support, Ritual has your back. Their Synbiotic Plus, a 3-in-1 supplement, has clinically studied prebiotics, probiotics, and a postbiotic to support a balanced gut microbiome. I've been using Synbiotic Plus for about 6 months now, and it's become a core part of my morning routine. I take the mini capsule every morning while making my way through my inbox, whether I'm at home or I'm on the road, because it doesn't need to be refrigerated. And the capsule itself is delayed released, which helps it survive the harsh conditions of the upper GI tract for delivery to the colon. And that's exactly where we want it to go. Ritual invested in a study modeling the human colon, which showed that Synbiotic Plus significantly increased microbial diversity and the growth of beneficial bacteria. There's no more shame in your gut game. Synbiotic Plus and Ritual are here to celebrate, not hide your insides. Get 25% off your first month for a limited time at ritual.com/tilt. Start Ritual or add Synbiotic Plus to your subscription today. That's ritual.com/tilt for 25% off. During this month of planning and organization for big transitions, rhythms and routines have been absolutely essential for our physical and emotional well-being. So Green Chef nights are reliably and predictably a good night. We know the ingredients will be fresh and prepped, the instructions easy to follow, and the meal delicious. We're all still talking about last week's turkey tacos with mango chimichurri sauce, refried beans, and Monterey Jack cheese. Green Chef contributes to a healthy lifestyle with easy and delicious menus like fresh seasonal salads and grain bowls, and with over 80 weekly meal and market options, plus rotating options to suit a variety of lifestyles, whether Mediterranean, plant-based, calorie-smart, keto, protein-packed, gluten-free. There are always plenty of options to choose from. Whatever you select, you'll get farm-fresh ingredients, organic whole fruits and veggies, and premium proteins, all delivered straight to your door. I love those 4 words. Straight to my door. Oh, and one more thing I love about Green Chef, they have an app, which means it's easy to manage meal preferences and delivery from your phone if you want to. And I, for one, want to. I am in that mode where I'm making the most of little moments like waiting in line at the pharmacy or for the F train to pull into the station to tackle all of those to-dos. So the convenience of an app is key for me. Green Chef has a special offer for Tilt listeners. Go to greenchef.com/tilt50 and use code TILT50 to get 50% off plus 20% off your next 2 months. That's 50% off plus 20% off your next 2 months when you use the code TILT50 at greenchef.com/tilt50. I'm wondering about the 2EA adults that, you interviewed a lot of people. There are a lot of stories in your book. Well, I have a few questions. The first is, did you find that a lot of the adults that you spoke with or that you've come across in stepping into this work more deeply, that they are on this path of discovery as an adult, or are these people who primarily kind of knew who they were or what their wiring was when they were younger?
So it's a mixed bag. Like there are some people who knew from a young age what they were and how to either embrace or reject themselves, because there were both. And there are others who just never understood why life didn't work for them until they were an adult. And some had diagnoses professionally, some self-diagnosed, which I also fully embrace and support. And they started on this journey of like, oh, this explains so much. Now I understand why this is this way for me, or why I never fit in, or why I struggle so much, or why I'm exhausted all the time, or, why my health is impaired. So, and even some of the people that have known they were 2EA from a young age, they still discover a lot more as they become adults, because oftentimes parents, we're both parents, so we understand this at a very deep level. There's a societal pressure to make your child conform so that they can fit in, they can have friends, they can be successful at school. And so all of us, the most well-meaning parents in the world, put that pressure on our kids early on. And we don't even realize we're doing it because we're not fully aware ourselves of what those societal pressures are. And a lot of times it takes your kid to just stop functioning, or to be a major behavior problem, or, have deep depression or something like that, before we go, hey, wait a minute. What is the quality of our child's life right now? And what can we do to make it different? And some kids never got that. They grew up their whole life feeling like they their parents were disappointed in them or angry at them, or, they were failures, especially in high achieving families, which of these 2EA kids often are part of a high achieving family. And so they're the odd person out in a group of sort of vanilla gifted people who are succeeding at all of the norms of society, and they're the one who's a failure. And so that can be really painful. And even with a diagnosis of autism, a lot of times they're still not understood. They're still not recognized within the family and the parent group. Oftentimes the parents have low expectations for them. And all of that is really painful.
We mentioned earlier that you have a lot of stories in here from 2E adults, 2EA adults. How did you go about finding people to share their experience?
So first, I want to say that the stories are completely made up. So these people are not real people. They're people from my imagination, but they rely heavily on my experiences with autistic people who are 2EA, who I've worked with over the last 20 years. Some of the incidences in the stories were people I've met in the last 5 years, and some of the situations and quotes may have come from someone I know 20 years ago. So, it was the intention to really protect privacy of the people I've worked with and make them not identifiable in the reading. But I'm really grateful for all of these interactions I've had with these amazing people over the years, because I feel like they're my people, even though I'm myself am not autistic. I have run in these circles for a long time, and so I'm proud to be part of this community.
I feel like for all adults, but especially for neurodivergent adults, with every year, there's just this deeper and deeper understanding of who we are. I think that's one of the upsides of getting older, is more kind of fully stepping into owning the way that we show up and how to kind of be in the world. I'm wondering, just you personally, as you've navigated the work that you do and raising the children you're raising, I'd love to know if you've made discoveries about yourself and how that has impacted the way that you show up.
Yeah, I definitely have made discoveries about myself and have realized that I have been masking heavily for a really long time. I joked with you at the start of the podcast that public speaking is really hard for me. I have to really gear up for it. And people say, "Oh my God, you're such a natural. You're so relaxed. Nobody would know you were nervous." But if you could see my hands, I'm twitching my hands and fiddling, and when it's over, I collapse in a heap. And that is something that I have given myself permission to out. It's like, yeah, my job requires a lot of public speaking, and it takes a toll on me. And so, I'm really kind to myself. I try to space it out so that I don't do a lot of public speaking, more than one thing a week, and I give myself time off afterwards to just relax and I try not to worry about it. I've gotten a lot less worried about, do I come across as a professional and do I look like I know what I'm talking about? Because really my work is from the heart, and I'm just going to talk. It's not really about my professional credentials, although that has given me the experiences I have to be able to talk about what I talk about. But I don't see myself as any more expert in this, especially 2EA. The people who are 2EA, I feel, are the most expert in this. And all I'm trying to do is be a compassionate voice for what they are experiencing and how I can support them. And when I'm working with 2EA people, I always tell them, you're the expert in yourself, and I'm here to support you. And whatever you tell me, I take as authentic. So I think I've relaxed a little bit. I've become a little more radical. I'm not really involved in the day-to-day operations of Big Minds anymore, other than sort of fundraising and outreach. But it still operates as a pretty radical school for 2E people. But I think sometimes even my speaking is a little even more radical than that, because I don't want people to feel like they have to fit in somewhere. I don't want them to change themselves to match anybody else's expectations. And I'm not saying that they don't need to learn how to code switch and that we all have to be a certain way in certain environments. But as I've gotten older and given myself permission to just be my weird, wacky self, I feel like I'm sort of giving that permission to everybody else too. So if there's really weird, wacky kids at my school, I'm like, great, be your authentic self.
Well, one question about what you just said, you talked about how you're giving yourself permission, you're being compassionate with yourself to just kind of be the kind of speaker that you are. And I'm wondering if prior to that, before you kind of came to this place of really just being, okay, this is hard for me and I'm just going to put it out there, did you make it mean anything about yourself that those things were harder for you? Like, did you have a point where you internalized that as something that was a deficit or a negative thing for you?
Yeah. I mean, for a long time, like I can remember putting on a suit jacket and, dress pants and dress shoes and going out to speak publicly. And my whole body just felt like this itchy mass of ants crawling on it because the pants were uncomfortable and the waistband was too tight and there was a tag in the shirt and my feet hurt. And, I'm worried about makeup. And so my eyes are stinging because I have no tolerance for makeup. And I'm just miserable. And I'm up there trying to present my best self and I'm castigating myself like, why am I not normal? In fact, I remember I wrote a poem in sort of my journaling about like all these beautiful things in the way people look and their hair and makeup and clothing. And it's not me. Like I cannot put on these, like right now I'm wearing a sweater and a pair of cargo pants, and that's, I now when I go to public speak, even though I have to put on this persona of I'm the founder and executive director of Big Minds, I work as a therapist at Summit Center, like I do have to put on a certain professional persona, but I give myself permission to just be my weird self. And if I have to wear comfortable, loose clothes and no makeup and, I'm going to come across as a very homely kind of person, that's okay. But for a long time, it wasn't okay. I really felt like I had to be that professional mask, that professional persona. And it took its toll on me. Like I have lasting health problems because of it. A lot of the things that I talk about in the book, I also went on that journey of discovery to realize that I have to love myself. I have to radically accept myself. I have to embrace my differences. If I can't handle people's cologne, I'll tell them that now, because otherwise, I've been in a room and my eyes would be watering, my nose would be running, I'd be having a headache and feeling nauseous because of the sense of people's perfume, and I don't want those people like, no perfume allowed, but I do want to say to people, excuse me, I need to go blow my nose because I'm very sensitive to smells. So I'm not asking other people to change for me, but I'm allowing myself to say, this is what I need. In the book, I call them escape hatches. So whenever I go into some situation I know is going to be really hard for me, I have an escape hatch. Like if it's going to be tough to be at a function where it's, socializing and it's like a mixer kind of thing, I'm going to be freaked out after about 10 minutes. So I'll excuse myself to go to the bathroom. I'll pretend to get a phone call and go outside and walk around for 10 minutes and come back in to give myself that space I need to be able to function and continue going.
Yeah. And I think, again, sharing this and the more people that kind of just own who they are, it gives other people permission to feel better about doing that. And it's just like talking about mental health challenges, right? It's just kind of destigmatizing, breaking the rules and, that it's okay to just show up as you are.
Yeah, because they're stupid rules.
Yeah.
I mean, most of what society has for us is it's not authentic. It doesn't allow people to be their best selves. And so, I'm fine with saying, sorry, that doesn't work for me. And I never used to do that. I was a complete pleaser. I'll do whatever you need to make you comfortable, to, provide whatever your organization needs.
We'll be right back after this quick break. Hey there, it's Debbie. I love making this show and sharing conversations about how to support our awesome neurodivergent kids. I've seen how even one little insight from an interview can spark a big shift in daily life. But I know that raising complex kids can be messy and lonely. And just when we think we figured it out, something comes up that boots us right back to feeling overwhelmed and stuck. That's why I've poured everything into creating a way for parents like us navigating complex parenting journeys to join together and chart a path that feels positive, hopeful, and doable. It's the brand new Differently Wired Club experience. In the club, you'll get personal support from me and other seasoned parent coaches, 6 live calls every month where you can connect and get your personal questions answered, the opportunity to learn directly from authors and experts like I have on this show, monthly themes for getting specific and tactical, an exclusive private podcast feed, and the best, most generous community of parents. Seriously, these folks show up for themselves and each other, and that right there is really everything, because it's a daily reminder that we're not alone. Our kids aren't broken, and we have totally got this. The recently rebooted Differently Wired Club is on a brand new platform with its very own iOS and Android app. It is such a great space. However you learn, whatever your style, no matter the ages, genders, and neurodivergent profile of your children, the Differently Wired Club can help you cultivate the positive shifts you're hoping for. Join us today by going to tiltparenting.com/club. That's tiltparenting.com/club. I hope to see you on the inside.
Are you overwhelmed by the things that get in the way of you doing what you want to do? Are you looking for ways to simplify life to better align with your values? Do you want to create space in your schedule so you have room for more of the good stuff? Play, joy, relationships, gratitude, and more? If you answered yes to any of these questions, I invite you to check out Edit Your Life, a podcast to help you edit the unnecessary from your life so you have more room to enjoy the awesome. Through episodes with me, Christine Coe, and a range of super smart, compassionate, and thoughtful guests, you'll come away with big picture insights and practical ways to declutter your home, schedule, and mental space without getting bogged down by perfection. I have always believed that small moments and actions matter tremendously. My goal is to help you find agency and space in your life through doable baby steps that will leave you feeling accomplished instead of overwhelmed. Check out Edit Your Life wherever you enjoy your podcasts.
So you've mentioned the word radical multiple times in this conversation, radical acceptance. I'd love to know what that actually looks like. I mean, you've given some little examples, but how would you define that? And what do you think it will take for us to actually get there?
Well, I think it's interesting you notice that, because really it isn't radical to allow people to be their authentic selves. But our society right now thinks it is. Like they talk about, this radical change in this company to adapt the lighting for people on the spectrum so that they don't have seizures, or whatever. It's like that is not radical. Making our public schools so that children feel safe and are not going to be either physically, mentally, or emotionally beat up because they're different, that's not radical. But it's sad to say that we have this whole idea about conformity and compliance, that anybody who bucks the system is considered radical. And so I use that word in that way because I want people to say, yeah, I have a right to be myself. I have a right to ask for what I need. I will do my best to code switch when I need to, but I shouldn't have to mask up and code switch all the time. Other people should work to let me be myself too. And it's amusing because it's not radical, but it is.
So what do you think then are some of the biggest roadblocks for us being a society that is radically accepting of difference, where these accommodations or just supporting different ways of being is the norm?
I think there's a couple of things. One, we have a great fear of the unknown. And so anything that's going to ask us to change what we have in place, people will immediately back away from and say, well, that's not going to work. I think about the work that was done in the 70s just to make handicap ramps accessible so people could get into restaurants, and for a person who has extreme disabilities to be able to eat in a restaurant. That kind of stuff didn't happen before. And I think we're facing this with our intellectual differences. And we know that the movement is growing and that there is probably going to be major changes going forward. I just read that the National Education Association has finally acknowledged that gifted people who are not accommodated appropriately for their advanced learning is just as detrimental as someone who is not accommodated for their deficits. So, that's just recent, and that shouldn't be taking that long for that to be recognized, just the vanilla gifted part. And then I think the other thing is we are an anti-intellectual society, and we feel like, oh, well, if you're so smart, you can figure it out. And we only accommodate people who are different, who are geniuses, if they're like the Elon Musks of the world, right? Or Steve Jobs, you can be a, a kind of a jerk in lots of ways and get away with it if you're wealthy and powerful. But you can be the nicest person in the world who's just asking for a basic accommodation, and you might lose your job, or your marriage might fall apart because your partner isn't willing to recognize that what you're doing is not intentional, it's part of how you function. Or to have an emotional conversation takes so much out of you that you're not going to be functional for the next day. So there's a lot of I think people also don't want to do the work. We want to stay in our little cushy chairs and have the world work the way it works for us. And that's nothing new. Like, nobody's ever liked change. So, I think we have to embrace the idea that the more divergent people that we bring into the circle, the better the circle gets, because all of those talents and abilities that are hidden, that's what we need right now. Like, our world's in trouble, and it's in big trouble because we've stayed with the status quo. And I think if we don't start doing something different, which a lot of neurodivergent people are different and have different ideas, we're going to miss out.
100% agree with that. I want to, before we wrap up, I want to just spend a moment talking about launching, because many listeners of this show are raising 2 EA kids. And I will say that for this season, I just yesterday interviewed Jordan O'Kelly, who is a 2 EA young adult who is successfully launching right now, is in college and doing very well, pursuing his dreams. And so I'm just wondering what advice you have for listeners who are raising 2E or 2EA kids to really help them progress towards a successful launch.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the hesitancy to launch is the anxiety, because they haven't had good experiences in the world, and the world hasn't worked for them. And so they're thinking, even with my parents, even the most supportive parents, right, that they've been the buffer, they've helped the child, but the child has still not had good feedback around, oh yeah, I can do this, life works for me. And even things like, when they become 12 and 13 and they hit that latent period where they're developing their friendship circle, their second family, a lot of our kids have never had a chance to do that. And so those milestones, the developmental milestones that move them towards launching, have not happened, or happened much later. So I think for parents, it's about reducing anxiety, about helping their children see where their strengths are, helping them learn to self-advocate so that they can ask for what they need, so the world doesn't seem quite as scary a place, to really stretch out the launching pad, because the runway needs to be longer for our kids. They might not launch till their mid to late 20s. But once they launch, if the parents give them that sort of support and help them understand how to use their strengths to be functional in the world, and how to use the advocacy for the places where they're not functional, then the world seems less scary and they feel more capable. And, parents, I think, oftentimes the sort of vicious circle is parents overcompensate because they see the anxiety and they try to reduce the situations that create the anxiety. And it's, good parenting. You're trying to protect your child, but it's a really fine line to walk. So as you're raising your child, you want to push them, nudge them a little bit so that they see that they can tolerate a little distress, that they can, be out in public and go to this event and do it successfully, or they can finish this project and be able to show it to people. So it's tricky, but if the parents can do that little bit of dance where the kids learn to have confidence in themselves, because really it's kind of all about self-efficacy, self-advocacy, staying connected to your passions, and really embracing yourself for who you are. That's what the kids need to launch. And so give them time, give them space, and help reduce the anxiety. Like, point out to them what they can do well.
Yeah, that is Great advice. It is really tricky. It's something we talk a lot about, the push-pull, the scaffolding, building up, taking down. And I just appreciate the reminder. And I love that language of stretching out the launch pad and just really accepting, not just intellectually knowing that their timeline is going to be different, but accepting that and really being okay with what that's going to look like.
Yeah, it's a major trust fall for parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, I've done this long enough. I've seen these kids where they're, 16, 17, 18, and the parents are despairing that their kid will never launch. And 10 years later, their kid's doing some amazing, groundbreaking thing and very successful. And, so I don't mean to say that all children that launch go on to do amazing, groundbreaking things. But to me, being yourself in the world and bringing your quirky art, or you start a podcast, or you work at a job that you love and you're an amazing dungeon master. Like, to me, that's all groundbreaking. I'm not talking about like the Steve Jobs of the world. I'm talking about the kid finding their place where they're content. They have their life works for them. They have peers who appreciate them. They have a vocation they enjoy. Like, that's what I mean by doing amazing things.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So just as a way to wrap up, I want to come back to your book, Being Twice Exceptional. I'd love to know what your greatest hope is for it in the world and what it will provide for readers.
I hope for people who are 2EA that they will read it and see themselves in the stories and be able to be like, hell yeah, I deserve to be myself in the world. And I think for people who are part of the ally group, parents, grandparents, relatives, friends, who read it, who have a 2EA person in their life, that they will develop a great level of compassion and understanding and be able to, I'm going to say radically again, to radically support their person to be who they are authentically.
Oh, that's great. Well, congratulations on the book. I had a chance to read it in advance and just thought it was great. And so I really encourage listeners to check it out. As you're listening to this episode, it is available. And is there anywhere that you would want to direct listeners to follow your work and learn more about you, Melanie?
I'm not great at social media. That's one of my deficits, but certainly the Big Minds Unschool website has a link to a lot of the work that I do. My wonderful marketing person puts out tweets and things about, I'll do a brain dump and then they'll put it out there. I also work at Summit Center as a therapist, so oftentimes I'll do groups and speaking engagements for them. So that's probably the two easiest ways to connect with me, because I don't have my own social media platform.
You don't need to. I am a fan of, if it feels good, do it. If not, don't do it. Especially again, as we were talking about at this point in our lives, it's time to just kind of show up as feels good for us. And we are huge fans of the Summit Center too. So that's wonderful. And listeners, I'll make sure there are links for all of these resources in the show notes page. Melanie, congratulations on the book. And thank you for taking the time to talk with us today and share all of this. And yeah, I'm excited to see where your advocacy and your activism takes you next.
Thanks so much, Debbie. I really appreciate your interview, and I'm excited for both of us to keep doing the work we're doing.
You've been listening to the Tilt Parenting Podcast. If you want to dig deeper into this episode, check out the show notes page. Every episode has a dedicated show notes page on my website where you can get links to all the resources we discussed, read a transcript, and even easily go back and listen to key takeaways by using the chapters feature on the podcast player. To get to the show notes page for this episode, just go to tiltparenting.com/podcast and select this show. If you love this podcast and want to help cover the cost of its production, please consider joining my Patreon campaign. For as little as $2 a month, you can help cover the cost of the hosting platform for this show, my wonderful new editor and producer, Andrea, and more. It's so easy to sign up. Just go to patreon.com/tiltparenting to learn more, or click on the Patreon link on any show notes page. If you're into social media, you can follow Tilt Parenting at Tilt Parenting on Instagram and Twitter. Visit the Tilt Parenting page on Facebook or join my Facebook community called Tilt Together. Lastly, please help this podcast stay visible and easily found by subscribing and leaving a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you so much. And that's all for this week. Stay safe, stay well, and take good care. And for more information, visit www.tiltparenting.com.
Hey, are you a parent of a teenager? Are you feeling overwhelmed about how to be what they need while also holding limits and boundaries that keep them safe? Are you tired of conversations that negate how messy this season of parenting is? Well, I've got you. My name is Casey O'Rourke. I am a positive discipline trainer, parent coach, and the host of the Joyful Courage podcast. Every week, I come to you with an interview digging into tough topics with experts I trust and solo shows that go deep into the personal growth and mindset needed to raise teens in a way that grows them into confident, capable young people. I am not afraid of getting real about the intersection of conscious parenting and the teen years, while also bringing in vulnerability, humor, and lightness. I'm walking the path with you and honored to serve. Listen to Joyful Courage on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you consume podcasts.